The desert was burning that afternoon, and the wind carried sharp grains of sand that cut against the skin. Emma walked slowly across the dunes, her boots sinking with every step. She had come to photograph rare cactus blooms, but the heat had grown stronger than she expected. As she raised her hand to block the sun, she saw something moving far ahead. At first, she thought it was just a mirage, the desert playing tricks again, but then she noticed a small figure stumbling forward. Weak and unsteady, she hurried toward him, her heartbeat racing with fear when she finally reached him. She saw a young boy, maybe 10 or 11. His lips cracked and his clothes dusty from the long walk. His dark hair was stuck to his forehead, and he looked like he had not eaten or drunk water for hours. Emma knelt beside him and opened her backpack quickly. She pulled out a bottle of water and pressed it gently to his hands. "Drink," she whispered, her voice soft and calm, even though panic filled her chest. The boy took tiny sips at first, then drank with desperate need. Emma placed her hand on his shoulder to steady him. Feeling his body trembling with exhaustion, she looked around, seeing no one. Only endless sand that stretched to the horizon. "Where is your family?" she asked, but the boy only shook his head slowly. His eyes were full of fear, but also trust, as if he understood she meant no harm. Emma knew the desert could kill quickly, so she had to keep him awake. She offered him the shade of her scarf. Holding it above his head while the sun burned fiercely, the boy pointed weakly behind them. Toward the distant dunes, Emma turned and squinted, trying to see anything that might explain how he got lost. But there was nothing. No sound, no tracks. No shadows moving across the sand. She lifted him carefully, letting him lean against her so he wouldn't fall again. They walked slowly toward a small rocky area where she remembered seeing shade earlier. The boy's steps were unsteady, but he held onto her arm with surprising strength for someone so exhausted. When they reached the shade, Emma helped him sit, then used her scarf to fan cool air toward him. She could feel the weight of responsibility growing heavier in her heart. She didn't know who he was, where he came from, or how long he had been wandering the desert alone. But she knew one thing clearly: he would not survive without her help. As he rested, Emma studied his face more closely. He had markings on his arms, simple lines and shapes drawn with charcoal. His trousers were made from old fabric, and he wore handmade sandals that were falling apart. It struck her suddenly that he might be from a nearby Apache community. She had read about them. Families who lived closer to the mountains, people who respected the land and knew its dangers well. If this boy was from there, someone was surely looking for him. Emma felt a chill run down her spine, not from fear, but from the weight of the situation. A lost child meant a desperate parent somewhere out there. She didn't know that at that very moment, far across the dunes, a warrior was riding hard through the sand. His horse kicked up dust as he searched for any sign of his missing son. His face was sharp with determination. His long hair whipping in the wind, he carried worry in his eyes. The kind of worry only a father could understand. Emma could not see him yet, but she felt something shifting in the quiet air. The boy sat up a little straighter and looked toward the horizon. His expression changed. Hope flickering in his tired eyes, Emma followed his gaze, trying to figure out what he saw. Soon, she noticed a faint shape moving across the dunes, a rider, fast and focused, cutting through the golden sand like a shadow brought to life. The boy whispered a small word under his breath, a name filled with relief. Emma realized this was the moment everything would change. She had saved the boy, but now she would meet the man who had crossed the desert to find him. And she didn't know whether he would greet her with gratitude, suspicion, or something far more intense. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of hoofbeats toward them. Emma stood still, steadying the boy beside her. Their paths were about to collide, and none of them knew how the desert would shape what came next. The rider grew clearer as he approached, the desert wind carrying the sound of his horse's hooves like distant thunder. Emma felt her heart beat faster, not out of fear but because she understood this moment mattered. The boy beside her tried to stand, but his weak legs trembled beneath him. Emma held his arm gently to keep him steady. She didn't know his name, but she already felt protective of him. Almost as if she had known him far longer than a single hour, the rider slowed as he neared them. Sand swirling around the horse's legs in a soft cloud, Emma stepped slightly forward, shielding the boy with her body without even thinking. The warrior dismounted in one swift motion. His movements smooth and powerful, his eyes landed on the boy first, and relief washed across his face like a soft wave. He knelt in front of his son, his hands moving carefully over the boy's arms, shoulders and face, checking for injuries. The boy spoke softly to him in Apache, his voice tired but full of emotion. The warrior closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling a long breath of gratitude. Then he stood and turned toward Emma. His gaze was sharp, not aggressive, but full of questions. Emma felt the weight of that look, as though he was trying to understand everything that had happened simply by studying her face. She raised both hands slightly, showing she meant no harm. "I found him wandering the dunes," she said. Her voice calm despite the tension in the air. "He was dehydrated. And I gave him water?" The warrior didn't respond right away, but his eyes softened as he noticed the half-empty bottle still in the boy's hand. He nodded once, a small but meaningful gesture. Emma could sense he was a man who chose his words carefully, someone who didn't speak unless he had something important to say. Finally, he placed a hand over his heart. A quiet sign of respect. "Thank you," he said, his voice deep and steady. Emma felt a small breath she didn't realize she had been holding escape from her chest. The moment felt peaceful, almost fragile, like the desert had paused to witness their exchange, but the peace didn't last long. Another figure appeared on the horizon, walking slowly toward them. Carrying a spear? Emma tensed up again, unsure if this person came with good intentions. The warrior turned to look at the new arrival and called out in Apache. The figure stopped at a distance, lowering his spear as if reassured. Emma realized the warrior was not alone in his search. He had brought someone with him, maybe a fellow tribesman, maybe a friend who had been helping track his son across the sands. The boy tugged lightly at Emma's scarf, pointing at the second man with a nervous expression. Emma knelt beside him. "Are you scared?" she asked gently. He shook his head no, but she could see something else in his eyes. Something complicated before she could figure it out. The warrior stepped closer to her. He studied her backpack, her clothes, and the camera hanging around her neck. "You are not from here," he said quietly. Not as an accusation, but as an observation. "No," Emma replied. "I was exploring the desert, taking pictures. I didn't expect to find anyone out here." The warrior glanced at his son, who was now leaning slightly against Emma's knee. "Seeking comfort? You helped him," he said. "You saved him from the sun." Emma felt her cheeks warm. Not from the heat, but from the softness in his tone. "I couldn't just leave him," she answered. The warrior nodded again, slow and thoughtful. "He wandered too far," he said. "The storm last night covered the tracks, and we lost his trail." Emma looked at the boy, imagining him alone in the darkness, lost in the vast silence of the dunes. "You found him in time," the warrior said. "If another hour passed, the desert would have taken him." A quiet shiver ran through Emma at the thought. The warrior turned to his son and spoke softly. The boy answered, then hesitated before taking a small step toward Emma. He reached out and took her hand, pressing it gently between both of his. Emma's chest tightened at the simple gesture of gratitude. The warrior watched them, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Then he spoke again, slower this time, as if choosing every word carefully. "You walked alone in the heat to help a child you did not know. That is not forgotten." Emma wasn't sure how to respond, so she simply nodded. The wind picked up again, swirling sand around their feet while the sun dipped lower in the sky. The warrior stepped aside, as if inviting her to walk with them, back toward the distant hills. But Emma hesitated, unsure if she should follow or return to her truck. The warrior noticed her uncertainty and said, "Come, his mother will want to thank you too." Emma looked at the boy's eyes. Full of trust and warmth, she took a slow breath. Realizing her day had just changed direction completely, she had saved a child in the desert. But now she was being invited into a world she knew nothing about. In the desert, quiet and endless, felt like it was opening a new path before her. a path she wasn't expecting but couldn't turn away from. Emma took a step forward, the boy still holding her hand, and together they followed the warrior across the cooling dunes, not knowing what waited for them next. The walk toward the distant hills felt quieter than Emma expected. The desert no longer harsh but strangely peaceful as the sun lowered in the sky. The Apache warrior walked ahead with confident steps, guiding his horse by the reins while glancing back every few moments to make sure Emma and his son were keeping pace. The boy stayed close to Emma, still holding her hand as if he feared she might disappear if he let go. Emma didn't mind. She could sense how fragile he still felt, how much the desert had drained from him. Behind them, the second tribesman followed silently, his spear resting against his shoulder, his eyes scanning the empty dunes for any threat the desert might hide. Emma realized they moved like people who understood danger, people taught to read every shift in wind, every shadow, every track in the sand. She felt out of place, but she walked with them anyway, trusting the calm she sensed in the warrior. After nearly an hour, the land began to change. Low cliffs rose around them, offering shade and softer ground, and the wind carried a faint smell of mesquite and smoke. It reminded Emma that somewhere ahead there were families, fires, homes, a community waiting for the boy's return. The warrior finally slowed and motioned for her to follow a narrow path between two tall rocks. As they stepped through, Emma saw a small Apache settlement spread across a shallow valley. Several shelters made from wood, hides, and brush stood in a circle, smoke rising gently from the center fire. Women were grinding corn. Children were playing near the fire. An elder sat carving wood or weaving baskets. But everything stopped the moment they noticed the warrior returning with his son and a stranger walking beside them. Eyes turned toward Emma with curiosity, confusion, and a little caution. Emma felt her pulse quicken. She knew she was an outsider, someone who didn't belong here, but the boy held her hand tighter. Guiding her forward, as if assuring her she was safe, a woman rushed from one of the shelters, her face filled with fear that turned instantly into relief as soon as she saw her son. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. Whispering his name over and over, the boy clung to her, tears finally falling after everything he had endured. Emma stepped back to give them space, her own throat tightening at the sight. The warrior stood beside the woman and placed a hand on her shoulder. He spoke softly to her in Apache. Explaining what had happened, the woman looked up at Emma, her eyes shining not just with gratitude, but with something deeper. She approached slowly, placing her hand over her heart. Then, touching Emma's arm gently, Emma felt the warmth of the gesture, a wordless thank you that carried more emotion than any spoken sentence. The other tribespeople gathered around, whispering and studying her with interest. Some nodded respectfully, others observed in silence. Unsure what to make of her, the warrior motioned for Emma to sit near the central fire. She hesitated, not wanting to intrude. But he insisted with a slight nod. "You helped my son," he said. "You are welcome here," Emma sat, the heat of the fire warming her legs, while the sky slowly darkened overhead. Children peeked out from behind their mothers, fascinated by the stranger with light hair and a dusty backpack. The warrior's wife brought Emma water in a clay cup and a small bowl of stew. Emma accepted it gratefully, the rich smell reminding her how hungry she was after hours in the desert. As she ate, the warrior sat across from her, studying her with the same steady eyes he had shown in the dunes. "You walked far," he said. Most people would have passed him without stopping. Emma swallowed the last bite of stew, then wiped her hands. "I couldn't," she said softly. "He was alone." "And scared?" The warrior nodded. "He is young," he replied. Still learning the paths of the desert, Emma looked at the boy, now resting safely against his mother, the firelight softening his tired face. "What is his name?" she asked. The warrior answered. "Dakota, it means friend to everyone." Emma smiled at the gentle meaning, feeling it fit him perfectly. Dakota glanced back at her and gave a small shy wave. Emma lifted her hand in return, warmth spreading across her chest. After a quiet moment, the warrior turned his gaze toward the horizon, where darkness slowly erased the last traces of sunlight. "I am Nodin," he said, introducing himself at last. Emma repeated the name slowly, liking the sound of it. "It means wind," he added, as if offering her a small piece of his world. Their eyes met across the fire, and Emma felt something subtle shift inside her. Respect, gratitude, and something she didn't yet understand intertwined in the quiet space between them. But before she could speak, an older man approached the fire, leaning on a carved staff. His presence carried authority, and the crowd parted slightly to give him room. He looked at Emma long and hard, then at Nodin, then at Tokuda. Something in his expression suggested both wisdom and caution. Emma sensed this man would decide whether her presence here was a blessing or a threat, and the night suddenly felt heavier, as if the desert itself was holding its breath, waiting for what he would say next. The older man stepped closer to the fire, his deep-set eyes reflecting the flames as if they held years of stories inside them. Emma sat quietly, sensing his importance. Sensing that everyone around the fire respected him, Nodin stood and bowed his head slightly, a sign of honor that told Emma this was no ordinary elder. Tokoda's mother moved her son to her side, almost protectively, as if she knew something significant was about to happen. The elders studied Emma for a long moment, not unkind but thoughtful. Measuring her with a quiet seriousness, Emma felt the weight of his gaze, the same way she had felt the burning desert sun earlier. Strong but ancient, finally, he spoke, his voice low and smooth, like someone who rarely needed to raise it. "Nodin says you saved his son," he said. Each word steady and slow. Emma nodded, unsure if she should stand or remain seated. "He would have died without water and shade," she replied softly. The elder's eyes narrowed, not out of suspicion, but concentration. "You walked into the desert alone," he said. "Most strangers fear these sands." "I was exploring," Emma answered. "I didn't expect to find a child wandering alone." A murmur ran through the gathered people, some admiring her courage, others unsure what to think. The elder lifted his hand, and the whispers faded instantly. "Our land is old," he said. "It accepts few outsiders, and it tests everyone who walks across it." Emma swallowed, unsure where his words were leading. "But sometimes," he continued, "the desert brings people together for reasons we do not see at first." His gaze drifted to Tokuda, then to Nodin, then back to Emma. "You cared for a child who was not from your world," he said. "That matters." The tension around the fire shifted, loosening like a rope finally untied. Emma exhaled quietly, relieved but still cautious. The elder motioned to a spot closer to the fire, inviting her to sit within the circle rather than at its edge. It felt like an acceptance, a sign she was no longer a stranger, but a guest. Nodin sat beside her, his presence grounding and steady. He seemed more relaxed now, his shoulders no longer tense, his hand resting lightly on his thigh as if he could finally breathe fully. Tokuda leaned against his mother, watching Emma with warm, grateful eyes that shone in the firelight. Emma smiled at him, feeling a quiet bond forming between them. A bond built on something simple but powerful: kindness given when it was needed most. The elder gestured toward the fire where herbs had been placed on the flames, sending a soft, sweet smell into the night sky. "This is a night of thanks," the elder said. "We honor what was saved and what was found." A few women began to hum a gentle melody, a sound that wrapped around Emma like a blanket, peaceful and ancient. She watched as the firelit faces swayed with the rhythm, each person connected to the moment in their own quiet way. Emma wasn't sure what she was supposed to do, but she let the sound settle into her heart. Nodin leaned slightly toward her, lowering his voice. "They sing for Tokuda's safety," he said. "And for the stranger who brought him home." Emma felt her cheeks warm softly. "I didn't do anything special," she whispered. Nodin shook his head. "In the desert, even a drop of water can be life," he replied. "And you gave far more than that." Emma looked at him, noticing how the fire outlined his strong features, the shadows softening his normally stern expression. There was gratitude in his eyes, yes, but also something gentle, something she hadn't expected from a warrior who rode across dunes with such fierce determination. As the humming continued, the elder took a seat, and the people began to relax, no longer watching Emma with uncertainty. Tokuda approached her slowly, holding a small feather in his hand. He placed it in her palm with great care. Emma looked at the feather, confused but touched. Nodin explained quietly. "It is a gift," he said. "A sign of trust from a child." Emma's chest tightened with emotion as she closed her fingers around the delicate feather. She had never received anything so simple yet so meaningful. Dakota smiled at her shyly before returning to sit beside his mother. As the night grew deeper, stars brightened above them, filling the sky like scattered diamonds. Emma leaned back, taking in the beauty of the moment. She felt safe here, strangely connected to this place and these people, but deep inside. She also sensed that her arrival had stirred something in the tribe, something they hadn't expected and something she could not yet understand. Nodin glanced at her again, as if he too felt the invisible shift between their worlds. Whatever path the desert had opened, she knew it was only beginning. And the winds that carried Nodin's name seemed to whisper that her journey with them would lead someplace she could never have imagined. The night grew colder as the fire settled into a steady glow, and Emma felt a gentle tiredness spreading through her body after the long hours in the desert. She rubbed her arms and glanced around, noticing that many families were beginning to return to their shelters, their voices soft and peaceful as the village settled into nighttime calm. Dakota's mother lifted the boy into her arms, carrying him toward their shelter, but the child kept looking back at Emma. Waving sleepily, Emma smiled, touched by his innocence. Nodin watched her closely, as if he sensed both her exhaustion and her hesitation about where she was supposed to go now. "You should rest," he said quietly. "The desert takes strength from everyone who walks it." Emma nodded, though she didn't know where she could sleep. "I don't want to intrude," she said, looking at the shelters that belonged to families who had lived here generations before her. Nodin shook his head. "You brought my son home," he said. "You are not an intruder." He motioned for her to follow him, and she stood, brushing sand from her clothes as she walked behind him toward a small, empty shelter near the edge of the camp. "This belongs to travelers from our mountain kin," he explained. "They are away for the season." Emma stepped inside and found a simple mat, woven blankets, and a small bowl of herbs placed near the entrance. It wasn't much, but it felt warm, thoughtful, and safe. "Thank you," Emma whispered, noticing how Nodin's presence made the small shelter feel less unfamiliar. He nodded once, the firelight catching a faint softness in his eyes. "Rest well," he said. "Tomorrow will bring new conversations." His words felt unsure, but meaningful, and Emma sensed there was something he wasn't saying, something he was holding back until the right moment. Once he left, Emma sank onto the mat, exhaustion wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. But sleep didn't come quickly outside. She heard faint humming, the wind moving through the valley, and the soft crackle of the fire still burning at the center of the village. It felt unreal that she was here, in a place she would never have found on her own. Welcomed by people she had only just met, she closed her eyes, letting the sounds soothe her until sleep finally claimed her. Morning came with a golden light pouring through the shelter doorway. Emma blinked slowly, surprised by how deeply she had slept. When she stepped outside, the village was already full of movement. Children ran between the shelters, women were preparing food, and men checked their horses or sharpened tools. It felt alive, connected, and peaceful. Nodin stood near the fire, speaking with the elder from the night before. Emma hesitated, unsure if she should approach. But when Nodin noticed her, he nodded for her to join them. The elder greeted her with a calm expression. "You slept well?" he asked. "Yes," Emma replied. "Thank you for letting me stay. You earned your place here," the elder said. "Dakota told me how you shielded him from the sun." Emma felt a warm embarrassment rise in her chest. "I just did what anyone would do," she said. But the elder shook his head slowly. "Not everyone," he replied. "The desert shows the truth in people." Emma didn't know how to respond, so she looked toward Nodin, who stepped closer. "We must speak about yesterday," he said. "About why Dakota wandered so far." Emma listened carefully as Nodin explained. "There was a dust storm last night," he said. "He chased after his dog, but when the winds grew stronger, he lost his way." Emma looked around the valley, imagining the boy's small figure alone in the swirling sand. He tried to return, Nodin continued, but the desert has many paths. And none are simple, Emma said softly, but he made it far. All the way to the open dunes, Nodin nodded. His jaw tightening, he was afraid, he said. Afraid we would be angry with him. The elder stepped forward. He is young and curious, he said. But the desert is dangerous for any child. Emma knelt to touch the sand. Letting the grains slip through her fingers, I'm glad I found him, she said. Anyone would have helped him. Nodin looked at her in a way that told her he didn't fully believe her words. You walked alone, he said quietly. There was nothing you gained by stopping for him. Except danger, Emma held his gaze, feeling a quiet heat between them. She couldn't explain. I didn't think about danger, she said. I only saw a child who needed help. Nodin's expression softened. But before he could speak again, a woman from the village hurried toward them. Her face was tense, her steps quick in the sand. She whispered something urgently to the elder, who straightened with concern. Nodin's posture changed instantly. Shifting into the protective stance she had first seen when he rode across the dunes. What happened? He asked, his voice low. The elder's eyes darkened. Riders were seen near the northern ridge, he said. Strangers. Not from our people. Emma felt a chill slide down her spine. The peaceful morning suddenly felt fragile. Nodin placed a firm hand on his horse, preparing to mount. Stay close to the village, he told Emma, his voice firm but gentle. His eyes lingered on her for a brief moment, carrying both worry and something deeper. Emma nodded, unsure what danger approached, but she knew one thing clearly. Her place in this village was no longer by accident. In the desert, quiet and watchful, was far from finished with her. The village shifted into alert silence. The soft morning sounds replaced by tense whispers and hurried steps. Emma stood near the fire, watching as men gathered weapons, checked their horses, and prepared for something she didn't yet understand. Dakota clung to his mother, confusion shadowing his young face. Nodin tightened a leather strap around his wrist. His movements sharp and controlled, his eyes fixed on the northern ridge. Emma stepped closer, unable to stay quiet any longer. Who are the riders? She asked, her voice low but steady. Nodin looked at her, and for a moment she saw a flicker of conflict in his expression, as if deciding how much he should tell her. There are groups who roam the desert, he replied carefully. Some trade, some wander. Some take what they want. Emma felt her breath catch. You mean dangerous men? She asked. Nodin nodded once. Sometimes they steal horses, he said. Sometimes supplies. Sometimes worse. Emma's stomach tightened, fear rising slowly like a cold tide. Will they come here? She asked. We do not know yet, Nodin answered. But we will protect our people, the elder approached then. Leaning on his carved staff, the morning sun casting long shadows across the sand. His expression was calm but grave. Our scouts say the riders are still far, he said, but they saw smoke. And smoke means movement. Nodin mounted his horse, the powerful animal snorting as if sensing the tension around them. Emma, Nodin said, his voice steady. Stay near Dakota and his mother. Do not wander. The way he said her name held something deeper, something protective. And it made Emma's heart pulse with both fear and warmth. She nodded. Knowing she didn't want to cause any trouble or add to his worry, Dakota ran to her, grabbing her hand tightly. You stay with me? He asked softly. Emma knelt and brushed his hair gently. Of course, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Nodin watched the two of them for a brief moment, his eyes lingering on Emma with unspoken concern. Then he turned his horse toward the northern ridge, followed by his tribesmen, their dark silhouettes rising against the bright desert sky. Emma stood with Dakota and his mother, watching the warriors disappear beyond the rocky hills. A quiet dread settled over the village like a thin veil stretched across every shelter and every voice. Women gathered the children closer, elders spoke in low tones, and even the wind seemed to move more gently. As if trying not to disturb the uneasy calm, Emma tried to distract Dakota, knowing fear could spread easily in young hearts. She sat with him on a smooth stone near their shelter, letting him braid thin strands of dry grass while she spoke softly about simple things. But the boy's eyes kept drifting toward the ridge where his father had vanished. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, spreading heat across the valley. Emma tried to stay strong, but inside her worry churned. She wasn't part of this tribe. She didn't know their enemies, their dangers, or their ways of preparing for threat. Yet the fear she felt wasn't only for herself, it was for Dakota, for his mother, for the people who had welcomed her so openly, and for Nodin, whose calm strength felt like the village's anchor. Suddenly, a young girl ran toward the fire pit, shouting for everyone to look at the ridge. Emma stood quickly, Dakota gripping her arm tightly. On the ridge, dust rose in swirling clouds, and shapes began to appear. For a moment, Emma's heart squeezed in fear, wondering if the strangers had reached them first, but then she recognized Nodin's horse, its dark mane flying as it galloped toward the village. Behind him rode the other Apache men, tired and dusty, but unharmed. The relief that washed over the villagers was immediate. Dakota cheered loudly, running ahead before his mother called him back. Emma couldn't help smiling, her breath releasing in one long, shaky sigh. Nodin dismounted as soon as he reached the valley floor. Wiping sweat from his brow, Emma approached slowly. Waiting for him to speak, "They turned north," he said. "They did not approach us." Emma let out another soft breath. "So the danger is gone?" she asked. "For now," Nodin replied. "But the desert changes quickly. We must stay aware." He looked at her then. Really looked, his gaze lingering on her worried expression. "You were afraid," he said softly. Emma didn't hide it. "Yes," she whispered. "I was." Nodin stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You watched over my son," he said, "and over my people while I was gone." Emma shook her head slightly. "I didn't do anything," she said. Nodin's eyes softened. "You stayed," he replied. "That is more than many would do." Emma felt her chest warm at his words. A quiet connection forming between them, stronger than anything she had expected. But before she could respond, the elder approached once again. His presence carrying new concern. "Something else was found on the ridge," he said, his voice steady. Nodin's expression hardened instantly. "What did they leave behind?" he asked. The elder lifted his hand slowly, revealing a small woven charm made from dark horsehair and bone. Emma didn't recognize it, but the reaction from the villagers told her everything: gasps, whispers, fear. Nodin took the charm from the elder, his jaw tightening. "It means someone will return," he said quietly. And not with peace. Emma felt her heart sink. The danger wasn't gone. It was coming. And the desert had only given them a warning, not a promise. Emma looked at Nodin, who met her gaze with something fierce and protective in his eyes. The peaceful path she had walked into was shifting again, and whatever storm was coming, she knew she would face it with them, not as a stranger anymore, but as someone the desert had tied to their fate. The bone and horsehair charm lay heavy in Nodin's hand, its braided strands whispering a dark message the moment he touched it. Emma could see the shift in the village the instant the elder revealed it. Mothers pulled their children closer, men exchanged tense looks, and even the wind seemed to pause as if listening. Emma stepped closer to Nodin, her heartbeat quickening with worry. "What does it mean?" she asked gently. Nodin's jaw tightened, his voice low and steady. "It belongs to a raiding clan," said men who take horses, food, and people. Emma felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine. Dakota sensed something was wrong and ran to his father, grabbing his arm with wide, fearful eyes. "Are they coming here?" Emma asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Nodin didn't answer immediately. He crouched down to speak to his son in Apache, his voice calm and reassuring despite the tension in his face. Dakota listened closely, then nodded and stayed near his mother, though he kept glancing back at Emma as if needing her steady presence. After a moment, Nodin stood again and faced Emma. "They left the charm for a reason," he said. "It means they saw us, and they want us to know they are close." Emma swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" she asked. The elder stepped closer, his staff pressing deep into the sand. "We prepare," he said simply. "We have lived through danger before. The desert has taught us how. Villagers began moving quickly, gathering tools, tying down shelters, and bringing children toward the center of the valley where it would be safer. The peaceful rhythm Emma had witnessed the day before was replaced by purposeful urgency. She stood unsure of what she should do, feeling like an outsider again. But Nodin turned to her with calm certainty. "You stay close," he said. "No wandering." "No leaving the valley alone?" Emma nodded. "What can I help with?" she asked, eager not to be useless. Nodin's eyes softened, the protective warmth rising again. "You helped once," he said. "You will help again?" "Just stay with Tokota's mother and the children." Emma joined Tokota's mother near the center fire, helping her carry baskets of herbs and blankets into one of the larger shelters. Children looked at Emma with both fear and trust. Gathering around her as if sensing she brought calm with her presence, Tokota stayed closest of all, gripping her hand tightly whenever he heard voices rise or horses moving fast across the sand. Emma knelt and hugged him gently. "You're safe," she whispered. "Your father will protect you," Tokota nodded, though tears clung to the corners of his eyes. Outside, Nodin spoke with the other men, planning how they would watch the ridge. Some would stand guard at the valley entrance. Others would circle the cliffs to look for signs of movement. Emma watched them from the shelter doorway, her gaze lingering on Nodin's tall silhouette as he prepared his bow. He moved like someone who had fought before, someone who understood danger deeply, and for the first time, Emma realized how much she cared whether he returned safely. The thought tightened her chest, surprising her. She hadn't walked into the desert searching for anyone, yet somehow she had found a connection she didn't expect. Hours passed, the sun lowering as the village remained tense and alert. Emma helped grind herbs, fetch water, and calm the children. Though her eyes kept drifting to the ridge where the men kept watch, Nodin rode out twice to scout the dunes, returning each time with no signs of the raiders. But he didn't relax, not even for a moment, as night fell. The village gathered near the central fire again, though this time the mood was heavy. The elder stood and spoke. "Danger walks near," he said. "But we do not run from our land." His words brought quiet strength to the villagers. Emma felt it too, the strange power of a community that stood together even when fear pressed close. Nodin approached her then, his face calm but tired. "You did well today," he said softly. "Tokota trusts you. My mother says the children stayed calmer because of you." Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. "I just tried to help," she said. Nodin stepped closer, the firelight brushing across his strong features. "You helped more than you know," he said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The night was quiet, except for the crackling fire and the soft songs of the women soothing the younger children. Finally, Nodin lifted a folded cloth from his belt and offered it to her. Inside was a small stone carved with the shape of a hawk. Emma looked up at him questioningly. "It is a protective mark," he said. "Keep it with you tonight." Emma felt her breath catch. "Thank you," she whispered, touched in a way she couldn't explain. Nodin met her eyes for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then he stepped back, his voice steady again. "Rest if you can," he said. "Tomorrow we will know more." Emma nodded, though she doubted rest would come easily as she walked back to her shelter. She felt Tokota slip his small hand into hers again. "Don't be scared," he whispered. "My father will protect us." Emma hugged him close. "Yes," she said softly. "I know he will," but deep in her heart, she also knew the desert hadn't finished testing them, and whatever came next, she would face it beside these people who had become more than strangers, with Nodin's carved hawk in her hand. She stepped into the night, ready or not. The desert would reveal the next part of its story soon. Emma barely slept, the carved hawk stone resting in her hand like a silent reminder that danger still lingered beyond the valley. When dawn finally touched the sky with pale light, she stepped out of the shelter and saw the village already awake. Women whispered near the fire, children huddled close to their mothers, and men stood on higher ground, scanning the dunes with sharp eyes. Tokota ran to her and hugged her waist tightly. "You stayed," he said, relief clear in his voice. Emma smiled and brushed his hair gently. "I said I wouldn't leave," she whispered. Nodin approached them a moment later, his steps firm, but his face marked with sleepless worry. He greeted his son with a quick embrace before turning to Emma. "You should eat," he said. "Today might be long." Emma nodded. Though she could barely feel hunger, her mind kept drifting back to the charm left on the ridge, the sign that someone was watching the village. After a short meal, the elder gathered everyone near the fire. His voice strong, despite his age. "We do not run," he said. "But we must be wise." He pointed toward the cliffs above the valley. "Those who can fight will watch from above. The rest will stay close to the shelters where the walls protect you." Emma stood beside Dakota and his mother. Listening to every word, Nodin turned to her, his eyes steady, but holding something deeper than instructions. "You stay with them," he said, "and keep the children calm." Emma nodded quickly. "I will," she said, but inside her stomach twisted with fear. She didn't want anything to happen to this family that had welcomed her. And she didn't want anything to happen to Nodin. As Nodin prepared to join the other warriors on the cliffs, Tokoda grabbed his father's hand tightly. "Come back," he whispered. Nodin knelt and rested his forehead against his son's. "I will," he promised. Emma watched the moment quietly, feeling her throat tighten. Nodin then looked at Emma. "If anything happens, stay inside the shelter," he said. "Do not run into the dunes." Emma held his gaze, her voice low. "I'll keep them safe," she said. Nodin nodded, then turned and rode toward the cliffs with the other men. Silence settled over the valley as the warriors disappeared above. Hidden among rocks and shadows, hours passed with unsettling slowness. Emma stayed with Tekoda's mother and several other women inside the largest shelter, comforting the children, telling simple stories, and trying to keep fear from growing in their hearts. But every few minutes, Emma's eyes drifted to the entrance flap. Listening for any sound from outside, Tokoda stayed glued to her side, clutching her hand as if it were the only anchor he trusted. The calm finally broke when a young scout sprinted into the valley. Shouting for the elder, Emma rushed outside with the others, her breath stopping when she saw the scout's face pale with urgency. "Riders at the far ridge," he said. "3 men?" "Maybe 4. The elder gripped his staff tightly. "Have they seen us?" he asked. "They were looking this way," the scout replied. "But the warriors are ready." Takeda's mother squeezed Emma's arm with trembling fingers. The fear in the village grew thicker, and Emma felt her legs weaken. But she straightened her shoulders, determined to stay strong for those who needed her. Minutes stretched into long, unbearable waiting. Then a distant echo reached the valley. Horses, fast, powerful, coming closer. The village tensed as shadows moved at the cliffs above. Apache warriors shifting positions, preparing. Emma's heart pounded so hard she could hear it. She clutched the carved hawk stone in her pocket. Dakota hugged her waist, tears filling his eyes. "Is Papa coming back?" he whispered. Emma bent down and held him close. "Yes," she whispered. He promised, but she wasn't sure if she was comforting him or herself. Suddenly, another scout arrived, breathless but smiling with relief as he shouted across the valley. "They're turning away." Emma blinked in shock. "They're leaving," the scout repeated. They saw the cliffs lined with warriors. "They won't challenge us." Cheers erupted from the valley. Women crying with relief, children laughing nervously. Dakota jumped up and down with joy. Emma closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Moments later, Nodin rode down from the cliffs, followed by the other warriors, all of them unharmed. Tokoda ran to him, yelling his name. Nodin swept him into his arms, holding him tight before turning to Emma with a relieved smile that shook her balance. "You kept them safe," he said softly. Emma stepped closer, her voice warm and unsteady. "And you kept all of us safe," she replied. Nodin looked at her for a long moment, the desert wind lifting his hair. "You walked into our world by accident," he said. "But you became part of it by choice." Emma felt her chest tighten with something deep and unexpected. "I didn't plan any of this," she whispered. Nodin nodded. "The desert chooses its paths," he said gently. "And today, it chose you as the village celebrated their safety and the danger faded into the dunes." Emma stood beside Nodin, Tokita holding both their hands. The desert wind brushed past them, warm and soft. A silent promise carried through the air. Her journey with them wasn't ending. It was only just beginning.